I'm an XX_XY Intersex Chimera. AMA. Hello all, I did an /AMA on a Screedit the other day and was asked to do a real AMA. So basically I'm an XX_XY Intersex Chimera, and what that means is that an XX chromosome and an XY chromosome zygote fused in my mother's womb into one person. The result is someone who has XX cells and XY cells in their body. This can manifest in different ways for everybody, but for me it means I have a penis, testes, ovaries, some vaginal nerve tissue, no prostate, no uterus, and it even affects my endocrine system and skeletal structure. I'm not a medical expert and my experiences don't apply to all intersex people because many of us are so different, but I'll try to answer any relevant questions I can. Verification. Hey fellow intersexy human. When did you find out about being intersex? Well, I had a bit of a feeling something was wrong when, despite being raised to believe I was just a dyadic male, I grew breasts and hips in high school. But I didn't know enough about intersex conditions to realize that was what was going on. As I got older I looked more into it, and last year at age 22, I finally got a doctor to do an ultrasound to map out my organs, which is how I found out about my crazy reproductive system. What's dyadic mean in this context? I googled it and still confused. Dyadic means, not intersex. Kind of like how cis just means not trans. It's mostly used in intersex communities to refer to non-intersex people without using language like normal. Pretty cool. What are some hobbies that being a chimera has affected your enjoyment of? Well, I really love swimming and going to the beach, and I always worry that some sort of attention will get drawn to my lower equipment. I can tuck, but that's still difficult. Swimming trunks and a bikini top usually work best for me. If you count social sex as a hobby, then it's definitely affected that too. But almost anything that doesn't have to do with my lower anatomy isn't affected by it. Most people don't really know I'm intersex unless I tell them. That's wild. I am sure this is a common question, but what pronouns do you use? I consider myself pretty flexible with them. Most people call me she/her, but I use they/them too, and I don't mind he/him either. That's pretty interesting. What was puberty like for you? Puberty was pretty confusing to say the least. I went into it sort of knowing what to expect as a dyadic male, and I did still get some of that. My penis grew, my testes descended some, grew pubic hair and armpit hair. I got a few thick dark hairs on my chin and upper lip, but I never really grew facial hair. I got rid of it, cause like, who wants just a dozen face hairs? My larynx widened a bit, but my voice is not at all passably masculine, but I can force it to go deeper than most women can go, I think. I also grew a lot of muscle, especially in my arms. But that's it. It felt like my body took the first 2 or 3 years of male puberty, and spread it over the entirety of my pubescent years. And on the flip side, I grew breasts, which was really awkward for someone who identified as a 130-pound teenage boy. My nipples also darkened and grew pretty big. My hips widened. I had feminine curves. I stopped growing at 5 feet 6 inches. My feet, hands and other bodily proportions stayed pretty small. Needless to say, I came out of puberty feeling really confused and questioning my gender. There are any advantage of it? Love your hair. I'm not sure if there is really an advantage, unless you count no risk of having children being an advantage. LOL. I feel like there are more disadvantages. Definitely. And thank you. I've been playing around with it a lot in the past few years. I find your AMA very interesting. Thanks for sharing your story. Do different parts of your body have different DNA? Thanks. I'm glad you find it interesting. And yes, that's how it is for all chimeras, intersex or no, but the result is different for everyone and never uniform. Someone could have predominantly one set of DNA for most of their body, but there could be cells with a different set of DNA in just a certain system or organ. From how testing is really expensive, so I can't get a comprehensive test done, but all I know for sure is that my ovaries understandably have XX cells and my testes would have XY, and my blood/circulatory system has mostly XY, but the entirety of the rest of my body is a mystery to me. How's your sex life? Best way I've ever been asked that. It's pretty good. I mostly stick to LGBT scenes because they're a bit more understanding, but I make do. I guess I do feel restricted from time to time. Like, if only I didn't have a body that required explaining, I could just hook up with whoever I wanted. There have been a lot of times where I'd tell a potential sex partner I just met a few hours before about not having the parts they expect me to have and hoped they were okay with it. Sometimes they aren't, but usually they're always curious. There have been other situations where I'd be getting pretty frisky with a stranger at a party, but I'd get cold feet and make up an excuse to stop if they tried to get into my pants. People always expect me to have a vagina and nothing else, so I always feel like I'm going to disappoint someone. Where are you from? Did you have many problems with other kids as a child/adolescent? Were your parents offered any of those horrible surgeries for you as a child? I'm from the East Coast of the USA and I lived back and forth between my dad in Massachusetts and my mom in Southern Virginia. I went to high school in Massachusetts from freshman year to halfway through senior year. I got teased there for looking like a girl but identifying as a boy, but nothing malicious. Everyone was friendly towards me and just kinda accepted me as LGBT even though I identified as a straight boy at the time. The few months I spent in high school in Virginia were awful. Nobody there knew me and all kind of rumors started about me as soon as I started going there. Most of the rumors had to do with me having both parts, which I guess was sort of true. But I also had kids who would come up to me and ask me if I was male or female, and I had some people call me shit like she-male. Being in that environment was a sort of wake-up call that made me realize that I didn't really socially pass well as a dyadic cis man. And no, my parents weren't offered any surgeries as far as I know. I don't have any scars and I'm pretty sure that I didn't have any external signs of my intersex status when I was born. But I did show up as female in the ultrasounds to the point where both the doctors and my parents were confident that I was going to be born a girl. Can you ejaculate without a prostate? I can. There's still fluid from other glands, and it's possible that I have some sort of underdeveloped Skene's gland, which is sort of a homologous female prostate that even medical science isn't super familiar with for some reason, lack of funding and interest. My ejaculate is clear, thin, and doesn't leave a stain. Smells kind of acrid. Are you sterile? Or do you have enough of a male's anatomy to produce viable sperm? Yup. Sterile as far as I know. Haven't produced any viable sperm. Which is fine by me. I'm not in a rush to have kids and my life would be in a very different place if I was virile, because I had a lot of unprotected teenage sex. Interesting that you have an active sex life. I would have assumed that you would shy away from that kind of thing. How did that work? Were you with boys, girls, both? How did they take you presenting as somewhat feminine, but with male genitalia? I was shy of it when I was younger, but I've gotten more confident and self-loving as I've gotten older, so my sex life exploded around the time I turned 21. I've slept with cis men, trans women, cis women, other intersex people, non-binary androgynous people, straight men, bi women, lesbians, whatever else. I haven't been with a strictly gay man or straight woman as far as I know. We usually don't overlap much. I've been pretty good about navigating an active sex life during these early 20s college years of mine. People usually assuming I have a vagina almost every single hookup I have is problem, but so far worst reaction I've gotten was disinterest in interacting with my penis sexually, which I'm fine with. I think I just have a good intuition with avoiding people who would be less reasonable. Hey up. I wanted to start off by saying thanks for doing this AMA. I've already read through the rest of it and it's really interesting. My question is in regards to you listing straight men as sexual partners you've had. How did they react to you having a penis? Well, I definitely haven't made a habit of doing it often and I'm usually a lot more careful about how I approach that. Usually if they're still curious, chance to interact with other equipment but not on a guy, we'll continue on and see if it's for them. There's been one time that the guy just decided he wasn't into it, so we just hung out for the rest of the night and he let me sleep in his bed with him, so it was all pretty chill. I think most of my interactions with straight guys have been through their girlfriends. Like more recently I've been messing around with a couple who are friends of mine. We were hanging out for the first time through mutual friends. They sized me up and decided they wanted to mess around with me. And then after the next party we mutually attended, the girlfriend told me that she and her boyfriend were interested. I told her I was interested too, but also went ahead and updated her on my body. The boyfriend was borderline in disbelief when she told him, but they still thought I was attractive and went for it anyway. He's pretty hesitant about interacting with my penis, warming up to it, but really enthusiastic about everything else. Hi. Thanks for doing this AMA. My question is pretty simple but also not, I guess. Read in another question that different parts of your body contain different DNA, so could you donate blood or an organ as a chimera? You know, I've never even thought of that, and that's such a good question. I'll have to do my own research, but I get a feeling that most places would see that as a risk factor. Are you attracted to men, women, both? Both. Anyone that I find attractive, really. I really enjoy other androgynous people too, intersex or not. Are you interested in identifying as male or female or having surgery to look more cis male/female? I like identifying as both and neither, it's just more comfortable for me. I have strongly considered getting bottom surgery though, just to make my life easier when it comes to sex, clothes, nudity, and legal stuff. By bottom surgery, do you mean penile inversion? Or some other surgery to remove vestigial tissue? Also, on another question you mentioned no risk of children. Does being a chimera cause sterility? Possibly penile inversion or similar surgeries. But I need to get more comprehensive tests done to map out my inner nether regions to determine what tissue is there and what the structure is like to determine if there would be a better surgery for me. And no, being a chimera doesn't always cause sterility, it just did for me. I think it's because both my testes and my ovaries are underdeveloped. Are you contemplating a life of crime because with multiple DNAs you have a 50/50th chance of deniability? Does your skin all match or do you have mixed colors or textures? What shape pelvis do you have? I don't think my DNA would actually be 50/50ths. It could be any ratio, actually, but no single test could tell me how much all my skin is the same. But I do have different color and textured hairs, but that's not unusual for anyone. My pelvis is somewhere between male and female in its shape. Probably a bit more low and in width as far as the average goes for dyadic women, but still in the shape. Thank you for doing this AMA. If you don't mind my asking, do you have any degree of vaginal cavity, or can you elaborate on what you mean by some vaginal nerve tissue? I can do my best, but this is something that I've gotten zero medical help with determining. All I really know is that I can push my fingers a little ways into my pelvis, as far as I can with being blocked by skin behind my scrotum, and that if I hit the right spot it's basically the best thing ever. All I can really do is speculate on that for now, but my guess was some sort of nerve tissue, possibly some sort of vestigial Skene's gland thing, since I apparently don't have a prostate. Do you have any particularly fun or interesting stories revolving around your condition? Mostly a bunch of small ones, like people thinking that my legal name was in reference to my son or husband. I don't have either. Doctors always asking me about my period, and then I have to explain why I don't have one. I once had a woman spend 5 minutes trying to finger me beneath my pants before I broke the news to her, and then she got embarrassed and changed her approach. I also think the look on my doctor's face when he told me I didn't have a prostate was really funny, like he expected me to be upset or something. Is your penis, well, average sized? I've read that many intersex people have a partially formed vagina, perhaps not formed to full internal depth, with what could be considered a large clitoris or a smaller formed penis. It sounds like you appear much more masculine on the genital side of things. My penis is above average size at about 7 inches when erect. It is definitely just a penis as far as I'm aware of. So yeah, definitely not a pseudo-clitoris/penis in any typical sense. Hello. This is a super interesting AMA. Thanks for doing it. Did your parents have any idea you were intersex? If they knew at your birth, why did they choose to raise you as a boy? And if they found out later on, how did they feel? Unless they're keeping something from me, then no, they didn't know. They did think I would be female at birth though, because that's how I appeared in my ultrasound for a while, so it was a surprise to my parents and the doctors when that changed, but they didn't think much about it. My mom was initially really skeptical of me being intersex, and I'm sure my dad was too, but their immediate reaction to everything is doubt. They're both accepting of it, but we've never really talked about it. I'm not even sure if they're really all that interested. Do you have a specific biological sex listed on your birth certificate? And if so, how has this presented issues for you, if any? I'm listed on my birth certificate as male, but I'm listed on my license and many other records as female. I'm sure it's going to cause some issues down the line. I'd like to get my birth certificate to say I'm intersex instead. I just looked into this and found that New York just issued the first intersex birth certificate at the end of last year. Wow. I'd have thought it would be something people had been doing for decades. Best of luck to you. Oh yeah, I read something about that. Unfortunately, I was born in North Carolina. They're usually not great about this stuff. Which bathroom do you use? I use the women's bathroom since that's what I'm usually read as. I don't have any issue going to the men's bathroom, but people usually think I'm lost and confused when I go in there. Do you have any enhanced skills such as musical ability or math or anything? I read something in Scientific American that middle-sex people tend to be the smartest. That is feminine males and masculine females. Not sure about Chamara. I haven't read anything about that myself. I do have a high IQ and I'm very good with conceptualization and information retention, but I've always attributed all of that to parents who encouraged curiosity and learning. But most of all, reading. I spent so much of my childhood reading. Fantasy, historical fiction, history, biology, and astrophysics were some of my favorites growing up. I think reading also fosters empathy because it exercises the brain with how to view things from the perspectives of others. Do you believe intersex people should be considered LGBT? I know there's a lot of different opinions. Some people say there should be full inclusion and call the community LGBT. Some people say being intersex is a medical condition and therefore not an identity. Thought you might have some interesting insight as an intersex person who identifies as non-binary and bi/pansexual. Sorry if this isn't your preferred term. I think that's definitely a bit of a gray area, but probably because being intersex is both a medical condition and an identity. For some it's just the medical condition, but others incorporate it into how they view themselves as far as sexuality and gender go, like me. So while I think the I has a place in LGBT, it's also its own separate and nuanced thing. I think the social aspect of it, better treatments and rights for intersex people, fits a bit more in the LGBT sphere, but that's just my opinion. Really cool AMA so far. Are you able to frequently meet others with the same status in person? Not often, no. The thing with intersex conditions is that there are so many of them and a lot of them are hard to define because being male or female is a spectrum unto itself with a fair amount of overlap even normally. Plus a lot of people who are intersex don't even know they're intersex if it's not easily noticeable and doesn't cause any issues. And many people who are intersex treat it as a taboo and private medical condition and aren't open about it. I've met one other openly intersex person that I know of, and they're XXY, or Klinefelter's syndrome. We're actually sort of similar because we both mixed organ sets and mixed hormones. But our outward body types, not counting genitals, are very different too. Interestingly enough, they're also fully South American indigenous, which I'm about a quarter. Our tribes are culturally and geographically related too, and many indigenous South American populations have a noticeable history of intersex people, which might make the odds of our similar backgrounds less high than you'd think. What's your sex drive like? Do you watch porn? Also, why do you choose to live life as a female? I mean, you have a penis and usually penis vs vagina is what determines our sex. Don't mean this offensively. I actually thought I wanted to be a boy when I was younger. I'm a girl, so it interests me because it hits home a little, you know. My sex drive can be fickle. I don't crave sex real hard that often, but it's usually up enough for me to be receptive when in a positive sexual situation. And I don't really watch a lot of porn tbh. I'm more into erotic fiction and pornographic art, I guess. I chose to live as a woman initially as basically a reaction to what I felt like was a failure and disinterest in trying to live as a man. I felt like I had to be solidly one or the other, and all the feminine aspects I developed in puberty felt like a sign that I wasn't supposed to be a man. And then I just slowly shifted towards identifying somewhere in between. And honestly, I'd have no problem with dressing really masculine and just presenting as a man right now, but with my voice and the way I look, that would just be really difficult. I just dress androgynous and people usually just assume I'm a cis woman and I just roll with it. Thanks for doing this AMA. I'm curious about your interactions with doctors. Have your GPS been knowledgeable enough about intersex people to be able to provide you with the best care possible? For example, during puberty, did your doctor acknowledge that you had unique needs/concerns? Or did he/she treat you solely as a pubescent male? Well, as a teenager, I think I only ever saw my GP twice during the course of puberty. He never told me anything and I don't know if he told my dad anything. It's possible that he wasn't even familiar enough with intersex conditions to consider it. I did once have a nurse at a hospital pull me aside and lecture me on the dangers of self-administered hormones. The staff knew I was some sort of transgender. At the time I didn't even know I was intersex. And I guess they took it upon themselves to lecture me because I had such a feminine-looking body for someone who was on their records as M. But the thing was that at the time I had never taken hormones in my life. I was very upset because they wouldn't even listen to me when I tried to explain that. Even my most recent GP doesn't really know what to do with me. There just aren't a lot of comprehensive sources of medical care for intersex people. That's just the way it is. Uneasy face.